10 unexplained us mysteries that will haunt your mind. Number 1. The man who died twice. Cincinnati, Ohio, 1987. Imagine attending a funeral, and a week later, the same man walks into a police station alive. James Carter, a 32-year-old teacher from Cincinnati, was killed in a violent car crash on April 9, 1987. His remains were identified by both dental records and fingerprints, and his grieving family held a funeral. Case closed. But on April 16th, James walked into a local police station, confused but unharmed. When officers asked where he had been, he said he had no memory of the past week. Authorities reran his fingerprints and DNA. It was undeniably him. Yet when they exhumed his grave, the body inside was also James Carter, identical down to scars and fingerprints. James recalled driving home from work the night of the accident, then waking up in a motel room 300 miles away in Indianapolis. The motel's guest book contained his signature, dated April 10th, the day after his funeral. No one could explain how James had returned, or why his perfect duplicate remained buried. He tried to go back to normal life, but something was always off. His family noticed small differences. His handwriting was slightly different. His favorite foods had changed, and even his voice had a strange, unfamiliar tone. Then, in 1991, James disappeared without a trace. His case remains unsolved. Who was the man in the grave? And, more terrifyingly, who was the one who walked away? Number 2. The map that leads to nowhere. Bitterroot Mountains, Montana, 1993. What if you found a map leading to a place that shouldn't exist? In 1993, 4 college friends from Missoula, Montana, were browsing an old thrift shop when they found something strange, an aged, water-stained map with an X marked deep in the Bitterroot Mountains. There were no town names, just hand-drawn paths. Curious, they set out on a weekend hiking trip, following the map's directions. After nearly 5 hours, they arrived at an empty clearing. There was nothing there, no structures, no markers. But in the center of the clearing lay a brand-new newspaper. The date? The next day. The front page headline read, 4 hikers. Go missing in Montana wilderness. Bodies never found. Panic set in. They turned back immediately, hiking for hours without stopping. When they reached their car, something was wrong. A sheriff's deputy pulled up looking stunned. "Where the hell have you been?" he asked. They had only been gone for a few hours, but according to their families and authorities, they had been missing for 6 days. Back home, they examined their cameras and journals. They had taken photos, but none of them showed the clearing or the newspaper. Only blank black screens. The thrift shop where they found the map? Gone. It had never existed. One of the hikers, Ethan, became obsessed with finding the clearing again. He went back alone in 1995. He was never seen again. Number 3. The Radio That Speaks to the Dead. Seattle, Washington, 2004. What if an old radio started broadcasting your own voice from the future? Emma Price inherited an antique radio from her grandfather after he passed away in Seattle. It was a heavy 1940s model covered in dust. She turned it on one night, expecting static. Instead, a soft whisper came through. "Emma, don't answer the door." She froze. Then came 3 sharp knocks on her front door. She turned off the radio, heart pounding. But when she looked through the peephole, there was no one there. The next morning, she checked her Ring doorbell footage. At 3:14 a.m., a tall, shadowy figure stood at her door, but never knocked. Over the next few weeks, the radio spoke to her again, always whispering, always warning. One night, it played a recording of her own voice, though she had never spoken into it. The voice sounded panicked. "Emma, don't go to work tomorrow. Please, just stay home." The next morning, she ignored the warning and drove to work. That same day, an electrical fire broke out in her office, killing 3 employees, including the woman who sat at her desk. Emma never turned on the radio again, but sometimes, late at night, she swears she can hear it clicking on by itself, whispering things she's too afraid to listen to. Number 4. The Door That Only Opens at Midnight. Brooklyn, New York, 2018. What if a door in your building unlocked, but only at midnight? Alex moved into a Brooklyn apartment that had been vacant for years. The landlord mentioned it was a pre-war building with history, but nothing unusual. At the end of the hallway was a locked door. No apartment number, no peephole. Just a door. One night, at exactly 12 a.m., Alex heard a soft click. The door was slightly open. Curious, he stepped inside. His own apartment was on the other side. Same furniture, same photos, same everything. But something was off. On the coffee table was a newspaper dated 1 year in the future. The headline read, "Brooklyn Man Vanishes from Apartment. Body Never Found." Chills ran through him. He backed out of the strange apartment and slammed the door shut. The next night at midnight, the door was locked again. A month later, a new tenant moved in. Alex warned them about the door, but they laughed it off. One night, Alex heard the click again. But this time, the door was open, and the new tenant was gone. Their apartment remained empty for months. The landlord refused to talk about it, and at exactly midnight, the door still unlocks itself. Number 5. The House That Watches You Back. Savannah, Georgia, 1999. What if a house was watching you? Lisa Harper, a real estate agent in Savannah, Georgia, was hired to sell an old Victorian mansion that had been on the market for over 30 years. No one would buy it. The first time she stepped inside, she felt watched. The air was heavy, the halls unnaturally silent. While photographing the grand staircase, she noticed something unsettling. In the hallway mirror, her reflection was moving before she did. A second ahead, like it already knew what she was about to do. She brushed it off as lighting her nerves, but later that night she reviewed the photos. One image made her drop her phone. In the final shot, she saw herself standing at the top of the staircase, wearing a dress she didn't own. Lisa had been alone. There were no stairs behind her. She had taken the photo from the entrance. Terrified, she refused to return. The house was never sold. Today, it remains abandoned, but if you drive by at night, you might see a woman standing in the window. And some say, she looks exactly like Lisa. Number 6. The Forest of Lost Time. Tillamook State Forest, Oregon, 2015. What if you lost 2 weeks, but to the world only 2 hours passed? A group of hikers in Oregon's Tillamook State Forest planned a quick afternoon trail run. They left at 2:30 p.m. and expected to be back by 5. But when they emerged from the trees, they were starving, covered in dirt, and exhausted. They ran to a gas station and asked the cashier for the time. She looked at them, confused. "It's October 3rd, she said. They had left on September 19th. 2 weeks had passed, but for them only 2 hours. Terrified, they checked their phones. Their photos, GPS data were corrupted, except for one image. It showed them in a clearing with a rusted sign. The words read, "You are exactly where you shouldn't be." Authorities searched the forest, but no such sign existed. One of the hikers, Mark, began sleepwalking every night, whispering in his sleep, "It's still waiting." A year later, Mark disappeared. His car was found parked at the same trailhead. His tent, sleeping bag, and gear were there. But Mark, he was never found. Number 7. The Silent Phone Call, Chicago, Illinois, 2012. What if you got a call from your own number? It was 2:46 a.m. when Olivia's phone rang. She groggily reached for it, but froze when she saw the caller ID. Her own number was calling. Heart pounding, she answered. At first, nothing but static. Then a voice, distorted but unmistakably her own. Don't let them in. Chills ran through her. Then, a knock at the door. She grabbed her phone, opened her security app, and checked the live camera feed. Someone was standing at her doorstep. The person looked exactly like her. Same pajamas. Same hair. Same blank, frozen expression. The knock came again, louder. Olivia backed away, her breath shaky. She turned off the lights, hid in the closet, and waited. The knocking continued for 3 hours before stopping. By sunrise, she finally built the courage to check. The porch was empty. But later that morning, she got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of her front door, taken from the outside. To this day, she never found out who or what was standing there that night. Number 8. The Mirror That Remembers, Boston, Massachusetts, 1983. What if your mirror knew things you didn't? Beth loved antiques. When she found an ornate Victorian mirror at an estate sale in Boston, she bought it without a second thought. At first, nothing seemed unusual, until she noticed small delays in her reflection. When she waved, her reflection took an extra second to respond. When she brushed her hair, the reflection's expression changed slightly, even though her own face had not. Then, one evening, the mirror showed her bedroom, but it wasn't how she had arranged it. The furniture was in a different position. The walls had new paintings. Confused, she ignored it, until a week later she found herself rearranging the furniture, exactly like the mirror had shown. That's when she saw it. One night, Beth woke up, and in the dim light, she glanced at the mirror. Her reflection was sitting up in bed, staring at her. She turned the mirror to face the wall. But the next morning, it was back in place. Beth told a friend about it, and they suggested getting rid of the mirror. But before she could, she woke up paralyzed, unable to move, unable to scream. And in the mirror, she saw herself still sleeping peacefully. The next morning, Beth was found dead in her bed. The coroner ruled it natural causes. But the mirror? It was gone. Number 9. The Book That Knows You, San Francisco, California, 2016. What if a book was writing about you in real time? Laura, a librarian in San Francisco, found an unmarked, leather-bound book on her desk. Curious, she flipped through. The first few pages were blank, but then she noticed the book was describing her actions in real time. Laura sits at her desk, reading these words. She shuddered. Then she turned the page. The next entry read, Laura hears the door open behind her. Just as she read those words, the library door creaked open. She snapped the book shut and turned, but the room was empty. Terrified, she took the book home and locked it in a drawer. But that night she heard it flipping pages by itself. The next morning she gathered the courage to open it again. On the last page, a final entry had appeared. Laura closes the book and's never seen again. That night, security cameras at the library captured Laura locking up. She never made it home. The book, still on the library shelf, and sometimes new pages still appear. Number 10. The Shadow That Wasn't Yours, Los Angeles, California, 2021. What if the shadow following you wasn't yours? Josh always walked the same route home in Los Angeles, passing under the flickering glow of streetlights. But one evening, he noticed something off. His shadow wasn't quite in sync. When he stopped, it took an extra second to stop moving. When he lifted his arm, it reached up before he did. At first, he brushed it off as a trick of the light. But over the next few days, his shadow became more independent, standing still when he walked, stretching unnaturally under street lamps. Then, one night, he glanced down and saw something that made his blood run cold. His shadow was walking away. Josh turned and ran home. But when he reached his apartment and flipped on the light, there was nothing beneath him. No shadow. For weeks he avoided dark places. But one evening at a party, a friend whispered, "Dude, your shadow's just standing there. It's not moving with you." Josh turned, but his shadow was gone. To this day, he never got it back. But sometimes, on dark sidewalks in Los Angeles, people see a shadow that doesn't belong to anyone. And if you're not careful, it might follow you home. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for next video.